Bitcoin has lost that 50-week moving average, and we need to be talking about what's likely to be happening next. As you can see, Bitcoin typically bottoms in and around the 200-week moving average and the 300-week moving average. So we need to be discussing how we're going to come in towards these moving averages, what's likely to be happening next. I have a lot of different charts actually prepared for you guys to be explaining this, and we're going to be dissecting that short term as well. We're going to be seeing what's likely to be happening for the up and coming week, so make sure to be watching till the end. Not only are we going to be looking at Bitcoin, we're also going to be looking at Ethereum too and seeing what's going to be happening here. So with that being said, let's not waste any more time. Let's get straight away in towards this banger. Bow. So as you can see on the chart, we have the 50-week moving average, which we've already lost. And typically, every time we actually lose the 50-week moving average, we actually head in towards a bear market. So you can see right now, it's likely we're going to be moving in towards the 200-week moving average and the 300-week moving average. And this lines up at 56k for the 200 moving average and about 48k for the 300 moving average. And of course, every single cycle we've actually tested these moving averages, we've been near a cycle bottom. So of course, right now, I do think that this is going to be playing out again, and we are going to be moving towards the downside in the coming months to retest the moving averages before we head in towards a new cycle. So zooming in a bit more, you can see that the market maker sell model is actually activated, and we're literally just past the distribution phase in towards the markdown phase, where we're going to be having two ranges towards the downside before we form our accumulation range, and that's where we're going to be moving towards the upside again. But right now you can see that the range is forming, and of course during this range typically you do see downside liquidity getting swept and then the top side liquidity getting swept, and then we're going to be moving towards the downside. So of course I'm not going to be surprised if we move a little bit lower to sweep our previous low at 80k, and then that's where we're going to be bottoming before we get a relief rally in towards key moving averages, and then that's where we're going to be moving towards the downside. So of course we need to be dissecting this scenario in more detail, but of course the main support level that actually stands still is the 70k support level. So of course, if we do come and take this previous month's low, if we continue towards the downside without reclaiming it, I do think that 70k is going to be a very, very strong support level that Bitcoin can be bouncing from, which I'll cover in more detail in a little bit. But of course, that's one thing to bear in the back of the mind. If we actually continue towards the downside and we actually start to form new range lows, I do think that the next support level is going to be at 70k. But of course, I do think that we're still going to retest the 50-week moving average at some point. It may be a case where this actually moves a little bit lower. We test the lows before actually springing back up and retesting it in and around that 95k region. And then that's where we're going to be topping out for the cycle. So of course, we need to be dynamic with price action, and we need to be adjusting our price levels as data actually presents itself. So if we start to see the moving average actually tick towards the downside as Bitcoin actually drops towards 70k and we get a bounce, then I do expect in and around 95k we're going to be getting that relief rally, and then that's where we're going to be moving towards the downside. Since we've seen that every cycle we come in towards the 50-week moving average, then we come towards the downside, as you can see. So of course I'm not going to be expecting any different for this cycle. Now, just observing price action, you can see that we had the US rate cut on the 10th of December, and ever since then we actually moved towards the downside, and you can see it played out exactly like we highlighted in our previous videos, where we had a rally in towards the rate cut decision, and once we got a rate cut we actually moved towards the downside. So that's one thing that we actually observed that actually came to fruition. But of course, you can see on this chart over here that we had a Bank of Japan actually making a decision yesterday, and they actually decided to hike rates by 25 basis points. So of course, you can see right now that the carry trade jitters may actually start entering the market as soon as next week, as typically every time that the Bank of Japan actually hike rates, especially after a US rate cut, we tend to see price action towards the downside. So of course right now it is possible that in the coming weeks we can move towards the downside, and again the major support level for me will be the 70k support level if that was the case. But right now I do think that it is possible we can move towards the downside, since every time the Bank of Japan actually hike rates we actually see selling in Bitcoin. And of course this may be a result of investors just selling the most riskier perceived assets, which is typically Bitcoin and of course cryptocurrencies, since of course invested capital in towards risk assets like Bitcoin from cheap debt from Japan is actually more expensive. So the cost of borrowing becomes more expensive in Japan as interest rates increase, and of course the risk to reward on invested assets start to decrease. So of course investors start to sell off those assets to actually repay the debt, and of course this leads to markets actually coming down. So this is one reason why we may be seeing a sell-off very soon. So getting a more granular outlook on price action right now, you can see that we're in this ascending triangle towards the downside already, which is a continuation pattern, and we actually broke towards the downside already and this is why we're seeing some downwards momentum, and we're finding it hard to break above our current levels right now. So of course it is likely that we can see some continuation towards the downside with the target taking out the lows, and of course I do think that this is more likely in my opinion. But of course, we're in trading within the weekend right now, so I don't expect massive volatility until next week Monday, which is one thing to be bearing in mind. But looking at the liquidation heat map, we do have liquidity stacked on both sides, so it is possible that we can move towards the upside from here. But again, I do see this massive liquidity at 70k, and of course the massive liquidity at our lows in and around the 80k region. So I do think it is possible that we can move towards the downside to grab this liquidity first before we move towards the upside. Now, looking at this chart, I do have to give the benefit of the doubt to the bulls, because ever since we come in towards this liquidity pocket over here, we've actually reclaimed the mid-range and we're actually trading above it. So as long as we hold the weekly open and we actually trade above this mid-range region, it is possible we can move towards our yearly open, and potentially we can move in towards the 100k mark where we have our 50-week moving average resistance. But of course, as of now, as long as we stay below this weekly open and this monthly open, I do think that pressure is going to be towards the downside, and I am willing to actually open up a trade if we actually trade below our lows and we reclaim it. I think that would be a great opportunity. If not, then I do think that this 70k support level is going to be the greater support level we need to be paying attention to, since there's a lot of liquidity stacked in this region already, which is likely to be getting grabbed. And of course, this is a proven level that was previous resistance over here, and of course it will be sweeping the 74k lows from the April tariffs, and we're going to be tapping in towards this support level over here, which was our previous 2021 all-time highs. So just to sum it up, I do think that as long as we actually hold above this level, it is possible we can move towards the upside. But in the case that we start to lose this mid-range again, then I do think we're going to be moving towards lower levels, whether that means we're going to be moving towards a 70k level, or potentially we're going to be deviating this range low and reclaiming it. Then I do think that we are going to be moving down, and we can just be seeing 80k bottom, and then that's where we're going to be moving towards the upside again. So if you're watching the video and you want to be trading for yourself, make sure to be clicking that first link down below for LBank. LBank's offering the community a massive 50% deposit bonus and a lot of extra rewards on top. So make sure to be checking this first link down below if you want to be getting extremely cheap fees on your trading. You want to be getting a 50% deposit bonus and an extra $200 once you actually start trading as well. I think that's going to be a massive opportunity. That's massive deals that you can be getting. If you do click that first link down below, it's going to take you to this page over here, and you can see you have about 12 days to actually claim this massive reward. So I will not be fading this if I were you. If you actually scroll down, you can actually read the terms and conditions, and you can see all the different rewards you can be getting. And again, depending on your trading volume, you can actually be getting an extra $200 over there. So that's an amazing deal that I have for you guys right now. So make sure to be clicking that first link down below to be claiming this. Now, for that longer term, you can see that USDT dominance is actually repeating history. We're currently in a phase where we're trading below resistance after we formed a triple bottom here. And of course, last cycle we formed a double bottom. We started trading just below resistance before breaking out in towards a bear market. And right now we're actually just below resistance, and it's possible we can actually start to break out before we enter another bear market. So my thoughts on this is, if we continue to spend too much time at this resistance level without breaking down, I do think it's more likely we are going to be moving towards the upside in towards a broader bear market, which means we're going to be moving towards 70k and potentially lower. So in my opinion, I do think that it is possible that we can be moving down now if we actually start to see USDT dominance lose this resistance level. So it's important that the stochastic starts to roll over and we start to see USDT dominance actually come down a little bit more, which gives us more time to actually trade in this red box in the range where Bitcoin can get a relief rally towards 100k and reject from that 50-week moving average. So of course, as long as we're below resistance, it is more likely that we eventually move down and we're going to be getting that relief rally. But the more time we spend below resistance, the probability starts to decrease, and I do think it will be more likely we actually spike above. But on a higher time frame, the momentum is still towards the downside, as I do believe we've entered a bearish phase, since we had the super trend indicator actually flipping bearish, and the last time it was bearish we led in towards a broader bear market after we've had a prolonged bull market. So you can see right now we had a prolonged bull market and now it's flipped bearish. So I do think we're going to be entering a prolonged bear phase. And of course, you do have your targets over here, which is the 200-week moving average and the 300-week moving average. So that's one thing to be bearing in mind. And of course, the monthly MACD as well has flipped bearish. So the next coming months in towards 2026, I do expect some downside pressures. But again, it doesn't knock the point that we can be getting a relief rally eventually towards that 50-week moving average before we actually come down. Since you can see last cycle, we had a return to the 50-week moving average, even though the MACD actually crossed bearish, and then we went towards the downside next. So of course, I do think that this history can actually repeat, and we can be seeing the return towards the 50-week moving average, just like 2021, after we actually grabbed the lows. So of course, short term, we can be coming down, grabbing the lows, and then we moving towards the 50-week moving average, and that's where we're going to be heading towards the downside. Now, as for Ethereum, there's not much analysis I can do on Ethereum since it's going to be correlated to Bitcoin, and right now the price action is quite choppy. It's quite, up and down and just moving towards the downside, since typically Ethereum is more weak in a bear market against Bitcoin. But of course, right now we're trading in this major support level, and of course, if we do lose the support level, you should expect some downside pressure. But I do think that potentially, if we come a bit lower and take this wick, it is a potential scenario where we actually start to move towards the upside and form this double bottom like you're seeing. And then that's where we actually form a lower high before we enter in towards a bear market. But of course, if you're looking towards this chart over here, you can see that we haven't even closed one weekly candle so far in the last month or so above the 50-week moving average. So we've actually stayed below the 50-week moving average, and it's provided many major resistance, even though we had a few weeks above it. We just had a deviation after that, and we've moved towards the downside again. So of course, I do think that the next major resistance point, if we can't actually break above this 50-week moving average, is going to be below 2,500 all the way down to 2,200 here. So I think this zone is going to be a key area for Ethereum. If Bitcoin moves towards 70k, I do think Ethereum is going to be moving down in towards this region, and maybe we get some bullish divergence, which leads us in towards a relief rally, in towards a bull market support band, and then that's where Ethereum is going to be topping out for the cycle, where we can actually test our previous lows again, potentially. But again, it depends on Bitcoin and what Bitcoin is going to be doing. And as for Bitcoin against Ethereum, we did break out of this 4-month downtrend, but we've actually come down, and we've seen weakness in Ethereum recently since Bitcoin's been correcting, and we've now tested it, and we're starting to see a small bounce. But of course, I do expect this to be short-lived, and we continue to trend towards the downside again very soon, especially if Bitcoin starts to move in towards that 70k level. But that'll be it for me. Make sure to be checking the second link down below for my free community also, where I'm posting market updates, free trades, and of course different insights, breaking news as well. So make sure to be checking this out, since I want to be doing some giveaways in there as well. So that's the second link down below for my free community. And also make sure to be following me on X to be staying up to date with all my updates, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one. Have a blessed rest of your day. Peace guys, see ya, bye bye.